She held his arm to scare off a creepy customer. The Mafia boss didn't let go. Rust Harbor never slept. It just rusted. The city was a graveyard of ambition on the East Coast, a place choked by the skeletons of container cranes and the constant, biting smell of salt mist. At night, the massive yard lights from the port smeared sick yellow streaks across the black. Oily water. This was my city, and it demanded its pound of flesh every single day. My name is Lina Hart. I'm 24 years old, though most days I feel closer to 54. My life was a spreadsheet of debt and exhaustion. Student loans hung over my head like a guillotine, and my mother's medical bills were a constant, dull ache in my chest to fight back. I worked the night shift, from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. as a cashier in the basement cafeteria of St. Aurelian Hospital on my supposed off days. I took freelance gigs as an American Sign Language interpreter. Sleep was a luxury I circled in a catalog but could never afford. I am small, which people always mistake for weak. They do not see the calluses on my palms or the steel that is formed behind my eyes. You do not survive Rust Harbor by being soft. The clock on the cafeteria wall ticked past 1 a.m. The room was dead, suffocated by the hum of the vending machines and the smell of stale coffee. I wiped down the stainless steel counter for the 10th time, my shoulders burning with a fatigue that went bone deep. The only part of the job I truly hated, the part that made my skin crawl, was him, Garrick Sloan. He had been coming in for 3 weeks. He always showed up around closing, when the cafeteria was empty. He wore a heavy canvas jacket with a fake Port Authority patch sewn onto the shoulder, pretending to be an inspector checking the hospital's delivery manifests. But he never checked anything. He just watched me. He was irregular in the way a tumor is a regular part of the body. He had pale, damp-looking eyes that lingered too long, tracing the collar of my scrubs. His suggestions started as compliments. "Pretty hands," he would murmur, leaning over the counter so I was forced to smell the sourness on his breath. His words quickly curdled into something filthy. "A girl like you shouldn't be working so late. It's not safe. Let me give you a ride home." I had brushed him off. I had been cold. I had been professionally polite. Nothing worked. He enjoyed the rejection. He fed on the discomfort. 1 o'clock in the morning, shift change. The rooftop parking deck of St. Aurelian was a concrete wasteland, lit by buzzing, flickering fluorescent bulbs that did nothing to cut through the fog. The mist was thick tonight, clinging to my scrubs, making the fabric feel cold and heavy. My footsteps echoed, too loud in the oppressive silence. He was waiting. Garrick Sloan stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, blocking the path to my beat-up sedan. My heart did not jump. It seized. It froze solid in my chest, a block of ice. "Leaving so soon. Lina," his voice was greasy, confident, "Please move, Garrick, I am tired." "I told you. I will take you home. It's not safe out here for you." He took a step. The sickly yellow light caught the wet shine of his eyes. He was enjoying this. He was blocking my exit, and he knew I had nowhere to go. I held my breath. My keys were in my hand, the sharpest one threaded between my fingers. But he was twice my size, and he knew it. Then I heard it. Laughter. Real, warm laughter. Cutting through the damp air, down the external staircase. The heavy side door of the Brass Finch swung open. The Finch was an upscale bar that shared the parking structure, a place of rich mahogany and expensive whiskey I could never afford. A small crowd was leaving 3, maybe 4 people, dressed in expensive clothes that looked immune to the cold. It was a split-second decision, fight or flight. I chose flight, but I needed a shield. I did not run towards my car. I ran towards them. They were silhouettes against the exit light. I did not look at their faces. I did not pick. I just lunged for the nearest, most solid-looking person in the group. My hand closed around an arm. It was like grabbing marble wrapped in expensive black wool. The man was tall, and even through the thick fabric, I felt the coiled, waiting strength of his bicep. A faint, clean scent hit me. Not cologne, but something richer, cedar and cold night air. Please, I whispered, the word tearing out of my throat. I pressed myself against his side, angling my body so he was between me and Sloan. Please just pretend you know me. That guy is following me. Sloan had stopped, his confidence wavering now that I was not alone. Hey, he called out, his voice laced with false concern. Everything okay, Lena? The man I was clinging to did not move for a second. I felt the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest beneath my cheek. He had not tensed. He had not startled. He had simply absorbed my panic as if it were nothing. He did not pull his arm away. Instead, Dorian Vale turned. It was not a fast movement, but it was total. He pivoted his entire body, stepping half an inch in front of me. His shoulder blocked my view of Sloan, shielding me completely. The heavy, luxurious wool of his coat sleeve slid down, his cuff brushing my wrist. He looked at Sloan. I could not see his face, only the back of his dark head. She's with me. His voice was deep. It was not loud, but it cut through the damp air like a razor. It held an absolute, bottomless calm that was infinitely more terrifying than any shout. Sloan tried to recover. He manufactured a sneer. Yeah, who the hell are you, her? He stopped. He stopped talking mid-word. He must have seen something I could not. Maybe it was the man's eyes, or maybe it was the other two people who had been with him. From the corner of my eye, I saw them, a man and a woman, both dressed as sharply as he was. They had not spoken. They had just moved. The man, Merrick, had circled wide to the left, his hands in his pockets. The woman, Ivy, had faded back toward the stairwell, her gaze locked on Sloan. They had not drawn weapons. They did not need to. They had simply changed the geometry of the parking deck. They had cut off every exit. It was a pincer movement executed in 3 seconds of total silence. Sloan's greasy smile evaporated. The predator had just realized he was prey. He looked from Merrick to Ivy, then back to the mountain of calm wool in front of me. When he took a step back, then another, holding his hands up in a false, placating surrender. Fine. Whatever. Just a misunderstanding. He turned and practically ran toward the exit ramp, his footsteps fast and clumsy, disappearing into the concrete shadows. The air rushed back into my lungs, and I swayed. My knees felt like water. The wool arm I was gripping was the only thing holding me up. Are you all right? The man asked. I looked up. His face was shadows and sharp angles. He was not handsome in a movie star way. He was striking, intense. His eyes were dark and analyzed everything they rested on. He was Dorian Vale. Though I did not know it then, I just knew he was dangerous in a way Sloan could only dream of being. He gently detached my fingers from his coat, but as I started to tremble, his hand found my elbow, steadying me. Merrick, the car. A charcoal black sedan, the kind that looks like it costs more than my entire education, pulled up silently. It had been parked in the shadows. The man named Merrick was driving. My car is over there, I stammered, pointing weakly to the far end of the lot. You are not driving. Not like this, Dorian said. It was not a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. He opened the back door for me. I hesitated. I had just escaped one predator. Was I walking toward another? He must have read the doubt on my face. He will be back. Garrick Sloan, he now sees you as something that was taken from him. You are safer with me. He did not force me. He did not rush me. He just held the door, patient as stone. I looked back at the empty, echoing space where Sloan had stood. The man was right. I got in, the door shut with a heavy, final thud. It was not a slam. It was the sound of a vault ceiling. Ivy got in the front passenger seat. Dorian slid in beside me. The car smelled like cedar and expensive leather. It moved off without a sound, gliding through the misty streets of Rust Harbor. We drove in silence for 3 blocks. I stared out the window at the blurred lights. I was vibrating, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a bone-deep tremor. I tried to still my hands by clasping them in my lap. I could not stop my right thumb from shaking. Dorian Vale was not looking at me, but I knew he saw it. He did not ask where I lived. He did not ask what happened. He just watched the city pass by. Finally, my own voice, sounding small and foreign, broke the quiet. "I do not know you." He turned his head. His eyes met mine in the dim light of the cabin. They were unnervingly clear. "But you picked the right one." He was right. I had reached out in blind panic, looking for a shield, and I had found one. But a shield always belongs to someone. That single, impulsive grab, that desperate act of survival on a concrete rooftop, had changed everything. I did not know it yet, but I had just thrown myself into the orbit of a man who ruled the shadows of this city. I had entered a world where protection was just another word for possession, and this quiet, dangerous man now considered me his. That night, the fate of Rust Harbor did not just shift, it tilted on its axis, all because I grabbed the wrong arm, or perhaps the right one. "I live in Northbridge," I said, my voice quiet. Dorian Vale simply nodded, as if I had said a name in a wealthy, gated community instead of the dampest, most run-down apartment complex in Rust Harbor. Merrick did not need an address, he just drove. The sedan, silent as a shark, slid through the cracked streets of my neighborhood. Here, the fog was thicker, clinging to the brickwork, making the buildings look like they were weeping. Northbridge Flats was a monument to deferred maintenance. The luxury of the car's leather interior felt like a sin against the backdrop of my reality. Merrick pulled up to the curb. The building's lobby light was broken, as usual. "I can go from here," I said, reaching for the handle. "Ivy will walk you to your door," Dorian stated. "That is not necessary. I am safe here." "He knew your schedule, Lena." His voice was flat, cutting through my attempt at bravado. "He waited for you. He's not just a creep. He's a hunter. Ivy will walk you up." I bristled at the command, but the logic was cold and sharp. He was right. I was tired of fighting. Just for a minute, I got out, and the woman, Ivy, emerged from the front seat. She was small like me, but moved with an efficiency that suggested she was made of wires and springs. We walked through the lobby, past the rows of dented mailboxes, the air thick with the smell of mildew and old cooking. I lived on the 3rd floor. We took the stairs. The elevator had been broken for 6 months. I was hyper-aware of my survival tactics. I always took the stairs. I always noted the exit signs. My hand, deep in my pocket, was resting on the small first aid kit I carried in my bag. Tucked inside, next to the bandages, was a legal 3-inch pocket knife. It was sharp. I knew how to use it. Tonight, faced with Sloan, I had not reached for the knife. I had reached for a man. I was not sure which was more dangerous. We reached apartment 3B. I fumbled with my keys. Ivy stood back, silent, just watching the hallway. "Thank you," I said, pushing the door open. "He left the card on your kitchen counter," Ivy said, not moving. I froze. "What?" "In the car. Mr. Vale, he told me to inform you." I turned. Ivy was already walking away, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the linoleum. I locked the deadbolt, my heart kicking against my ribs. My apartment was tiny, but it was clean. The main room was a living room, kitchen and dining room all in one. In the corner, by the only window that was not cracked, was the hospital bed. My mother, May, was asleep. Her breathing was shallow, punctuated by the rhythmic, gentle shush click of the home dialysis machine. Her life was governed by that machine. 3 times a week, 4 hours a session, my life was governed by her. Every tip I made at the cafeteria, every extra dollar from an interpreting gig went into the jar labeled May's Kidney Fund. It was barely anything, but it was all we had. And, as Ivy had said, sitting on the small Formica counter was a business card. It was not paper. It was a thin slice of black metal. It was heavy in my hand. It had no name, no number, just a single, stylized letter V embossed in the center. I turned, and my breath caught. Dorian Vale was standing in the doorway to my mother's area. He had not followed me up. He had been waiting. He must have used a different staircase, or perhaps the broken elevator was not broken for him. "My people are thorough," he said, his voice low, not wanting to wake my mother. "They scanned your keys when you got in the car. They made a copy. Ivy was here while we were driving." I felt a cold violation, a fury that made my hands shake. "You broke into my apartment." "I secured your apartment," he corrected, his gaze moving from May to the dialysis machine, to the schedule taped on the peeling refrigerator door. "We checked for listening devices. We checked the windows. The lock on your front door is useless. I had Merrick replace the cylinder while Ivy walked you up. Your old key will not work anymore." He held up my keychain, which he must have taken from my bag in the car. He detached the old key and placed a new, shiny, silver one on the ring. "You had no right," I whispered, trying to keep my voice down. "He knew your schedule," Dorian repeated. Walking fully into the room, he dominated the small space. He looked at the lists on the fridge, the stacks of medical bills on the table. But he knew more than that, did not he? It was not a question. It was a prompt. He was digging. I do not know what you mean." "Sloan. He did not just know when you left. He knew things about the hospital. A man with a fake Port Authority jacket, hanging around a cafeteria. He was not there for the coffee. What did he talk about?" I thought back, pushing past the oily compliments and the creepy stares. Sloan had always been talking, trying to impress me, trying to show he had inside knowledge. He knew the patient rosters sometimes. He mentioned Mr. Henderson in room 412, said he hoped the nurse was not late with his 9 p.m. insulin. Dorian's eyes sharpened. He knew a specific patient's medication schedule. Yes. I suddenly felt cold. He said it was a shame the hospital was so poorly managed, that supplies were always going missing. What supplies? Little things at first. Syringes, high-grade saline bags, but last week... I stopped, realizing what I was admitting. Last week, a whole shipment of PHX-13 vanished. It is a renal medication for dialysis. It was supposed to go to cold storage, but it never even made the check-in sheet. PHX-13, Dorian said, testing the name, and Sloan knew about this. He was the one who told me it was lost. He said he saw the manifest. He was always around the loading bay, talking to the transport staff. Did you see anything? I hesitated. I saw a chalk mark on the wheel of a pallet that was supposed to be holding that shipment. It was moved to the wrong bay. The mark was a word, Ren, and 3 dots in a triangle. Ren, and then the dots. Dorian Vale went very still. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if I had just changed from a black and white photograph into a full-color, living thing. The Black Wren Syndicate, when he said, his voice was flat, devoid of emotion. What is that A gang? No. He dismissed the idea with a slight shake of his head. A gang is messy. A gang wants territory. The Wrens are clean. They are a middleman network. They do not get their hands dirty with street-level nonsense. They are corporate. They move in shadows, facilitating the theft of essential goods and selling them to desperate, high-paying clients, pharmaceuticals, medical tech. They turn life-saving supplies into dirty money, and they do it with spreadsheets and encrypted logistics. He looked at my mother. PHX-13. They stole medication intended for patients like her. A sick understanding settled in my stomach. Sloan was not just a stalker. He was a spotter, a piece of a much larger, darker machine. He knew my schedule, and he knew about the insulin. I pieced together, because he has someone inside the hospital, someone feeding him information. Correct, Dorian said. He moved to the counter and tapped the black metal card I was still holding. You are no longer dealing with a simple stalker. Lena, you are a witness who has seen their mark, and you have seen my face. They cannot allow that. I hated this. I hated the fear, but I hated the feeling of being a victim more. I can handle myself. What you did tonight was smart, he acknowledged, but it was a gamble. You chose me over your knife. Now, That choice has consequences for both of us. He walked to the door, his presence shrinking as he prepared to leave, giving me my space back. Keep that card when he said, "It is encrypted. It does not make calls. If you are in trouble, press the V for 2 seconds, that is all. If he returns, if you see anyone you do not know, if a nurse looks at you the wrong way, you press it." I looked at the card, then at him. I do not want your protection. I do not want to be indebted to you. He paused, his hand on the new lock, indebted. He seemed to roll the word around in his mouth, tasting it. When you grabbed my arm tonight, you put yourself in the public square with me. In my world, that is a declaration. The Vale family keeps its word. We protect what is ours. I'm not yours. His gaze was heavy, not threatening, but absolute. Having taken my arm in public, you are under Vale protection. It is done. This is not a negotiation. It is a fact. The words hung in the air, equal parts a warm blanket and a cold steel cage. I hated it. I hated feeling weak, feeling like I needed a man with shadows in his eyes to save me. But then I looked at May, at her pale, sleeping face. She was my vulnerability. She was the one thing I could not risk. My pride was a luxury I could not afford when her life was on the line. I closed my hand around the cold metal card. Okay. Dorian nodded once. Merrick will be at the end of the street until morning. Ivy will be back at 6 p.m. to follow you to the hospital. Do not deviate from your schedule. Do not be a hero. Just be a cashier. We will handle the rest. He left, closing the door with a quiet, solid click that echoed the sound of the sedan's door. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in a cage I could not see. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair by May's bed, watching the digital readout on the dialysis machine. When the sun finally broke, painting the fog a dirty gray, I felt exhausted but marginally safer. Merrick was gone. The street looked normal. I made coffee, my hands shaking. I had to get to my car to run an errand for May's prescription refills before my interpreting gig at 10. I walked out into the damp morning. The air was cold. I crossed the street to where my car was parked, and I stopped. My entire body went numb. There, sitting perfectly in the center of my car's rusty trunk, was a single, small earring. It was cheap metal, painted black. It was shaped like a tiny bird, a wren. Sloan had been here after Dorian left, after the guards were supposedly watching. He had been here, close enough to touch my car, close enough to leave a message. This was not protection. This was a threat. He was marking his territory. He was telling me that Dorian Vale could not keep me safe. He was telling me he was still watching. I did not press the button on the black card. Not yet. Instead, I picked up the wren earring with a tissue, dropped it in a plastic bag, and went to my interpreting gig. I moved through the motions of my day, my mind a cold, buzzing engine. I was no longer just tired and scared. I was angry. Sloan had not just threatened me. He had trespassed. He had left a symbol on my car, a mark of ownership that mocked Dorian Vale's promise of protection. That night, Ivy drove me to work. She did not speak. The silence in the luxury sedan was as thick and heavy as the fog coiling outside. Rust Harbor's port was alive. It was a different kind of life from the hospital. It was mechanical, metallic. From the highway overpass, I could see the cranes moving against the black sky, spotlights cutting the mist. I heard the deep, mournful groan of a foghorn and the constant, rhythmic clang of steel chains. Miles away, in a glass-walled office overlooking that mechanical ballet, Dorian Vale was at work. His world was Pier 19 by day. Vale Logistics was a legitimate, high-volume shipping hub. Forklifts moved in a precise, choreographed dance, loading and unloading containers. It was clean, efficient, and profitable. But the real work happened after hours, in a department that was not on any official floor plan internal compliance. Dorian was not a street brawler. He was a logistician. He did not send thugs to crack skulls. He sent auditors to check spreadsheets. He sat at a massive, empty oak desk, reviewing a report from his head of compliance. "You were right," the auditor said, his voice tinny over the speakerphone. "We ran a check on all manifests inbound to the St. Aurelian cold storage, cross-referencing our own leased trucks. 4 times in the last month, our trucks arrived with replacement tamper-evident seals." "Seals they replaced themselves," Dorian stated. "Correct. The driver logs show damaged seal, replaced en route. Standard procedure, except the damage codes do not match, and the replacement seals, they are Harbor Gate protective issue, not ours." "Harbor Gate," Dorian said. The name settled in the air. At that exact moment, Ivy was in a different part of the city, in a van parked across from a dimly lit bar. She was watching a street-level security camera feed on a laptop. She watched Garrick Sloan, bold and cocky now, step out of the bar. He was not alone. He was shaking hands with a man in a crisp, black suit. The man's jacket had a small, discreet logo on the lapel. Ivy enhanced the image. The man turned, his face clear under a streetlight. She made the call. "I have him, Sloan. He's meeting Severin Locke." "Locke," Dorian's voice replied in her ear. "Regional manager for Harbor Gate Protective." "They provide security for the hospital's loading bay," Ivy said, her voice clipped, "and half the other warehouses in this district." "They have been switching our seals," Dorian said. "Sloan is their spotter. He identifies the shipment. Harbor Gate gives him the access. They swap the cargo, replace the seal, and the truck arrives at St. Aurelian perfectly secure, but completely empty. The Wrens never even have to touch the port. I was the missing piece, and I did not even know it. I was at St. Aurelian, standing under the buzzing cafeteria lights, my skin crawling. Every patient seemed to be watching me. Every orderly looked like a threat. I tried to focus on my job, stocking the coolers, wiping the counters. A transport orderly, one I recognized, dropped a stack of manifests on the counter by the register. "Hey, Lena, can you hold these? Supervisor needs them signed off." "Sure, Mike." He left. I glanced at the papers. They were delivery manifests for the cafeteria, but underneath them were intake forms for the pharmacy. My eyes scanned the lists of saline, bandages, and PHX-13, the shipment that had vanished. And I saw it. In the margin of the pharmacy intake log, next to the box for PHX-13, was a small, neat, handwritten notation in blue ink. It was not the blocky printing of the transport crew or the hurried scrawl of the nurses. It was precise. "FCB okay." It meant nothing to me, but I remembered the way Dorian had analyzed every detail. I took out my phone, snapped a quick, clear picture, and deleted it from my main gallery. When Ivy picked me up at 4 a.m., the parking lot was empty. Sloan was not there. The car was quiet as we drove. "Sloan met with a man named Severin Locke," I said to the back of Ivy's head. She did not react. "We know. Locke runs Harbor Gate Protective. They run security for our loading bay. Sloan has been hanging around them, too." Ivy's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "Keep talking." "I found this." I showed her the picture on my phone. "On the pharmacy manifest for the stolen PHX-13. FCB okay. It is not a hospital signature. I have never seen it before." Ivy pulled the car over, her movements sharp. She took the phone, zoomed in, and stared at the 3 letters. She made a call. "She found something," Ivy said, handing the phone to me. "Tell him." "It's Lena," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I found a signature on the manifest. FCB okay." Dorian's voice came back, low and thoughtful. "Federal Commerce Bureau." The government? "A fictional government," Dorian clarified. "The Black Wrens are meticulous. They do not just steal. They create a paper trail to legitimize the theft. They invent a government oversight body, the FCB, which requisitions the shipment for quality control. Harbor Gate, the security company, facilitates the handover. The shipment evaporates before it even hits the hospital's cold storage. It is clean, it is bloodless, and the patients, the ones like your mother, are the only ones who pay the price." A cold fury settled over me. They are using the hospital. They are using their own security uniforms to steal medicine from sick people. And Sloan is their man on the inside, Dorian finished. He spots the shipments and threatens the witnesses. Like you. There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing. Lena, he said, and his voice was harder now, edged with something I had not heard before. In my family, we have rules. We do not touch civilians. We do not touch churches. And we do not, under any circumstances, touch hospitals. We do not threaten medical staff, the Wrens, by using Sloan to threaten you. Just broke that rule. I felt a strange, cold relief. He was a criminal, a man who laundered money through warehouses, but he had a line, and Sloan had just crossed it. We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we got to my apartment, Dorian was there. He was leaning against the hallway wall, as if he had been waiting for hours. Ivy nodded and disappeared down the stairs. He called, Dorian said, not moving. What? Sloan, he did not call you. He called the cafeteria's main line. During your shift, he left a voicemail for the manager to find. Dorian pushed himself off the wall. He said, "Tell the pretty little cashier I am sorry I missed her, and tell her that arm she was holding. Let's see how long he holds on." My blood ran cold. It was a direct challenge. "He is arrogant," I whispered. "He is stupid," Dorian countered. "He thinks this is a game. He thinks I am just another man. He does not understand what he is dealing with." He walked with me to my door. "Tomorrow night, your drive to work will be different." The next evening, it was when Ivy drove me to St. Aurelian. The change was blinding. The rooftop parking deck, usually a pit of flickering bulbs and deep shadows, was now lit up like a stadium. 3 massive, portable floodlight towers, the kind used for construction sites, were positioned at the corners of the lot, bathing every inch of the concrete in brilliant, shadowless white light. And parked in a neat, intimidating row near the entrance were 5 black Veil logistics sedans, identical to the one I was in. They were empty. They were just there. "What is this?" I asked, stunned. "A gift," Ivy said, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Mister, Vale made a sizable donation to the St. Aurelian Night Shift Security Fund. The lights are permanent." Dorian had not sent thugs. He had not started a war. He had changed the landscape. He had taken away the shadows Sloan needed to operate. He had turned the parking deck into a fortress, a public declaration that this ground was protected. I got out of the car, my head spinning. I saw Dorian standing by the stairwell door, the one I had run to 2 nights ago. He was waiting for me. He did not say hello. He just looked at the new, bright lights. He cannot hunt where there are no shadows. "This is a lot," I said, gesturing to the lights, the cars. "It is a message. Now, he knows I am watching. And now, all of Rust Harbor knows I am watching you." He held out his hand. In his palm was a simple, heavy keychain. It was brushed steel, rectangular, with a single word laser-etched into its surface: "Hold." "You have the card," he said. "That is for danger. This is for something else." He took my keys from my hand and threaded the keychain onto the ring, next to the new apartment key he had given me. "You grabbed my arm," he said, his voice quiet, his eyes locked on mine. "That is our signal. If you are in trouble, if you are scared, if you just need to know I am there, you hold this, you hold it, and I will not let go." It was an emotional promise. It was a tactical command. It was a contract, written in steel. I curled my fingers around the keychain. The metal was cool, solid. "He threatened me," I said, the anger returning. "He threatened you." "He did," Dorian agreed, his hand briefly, lightly, covering mine. His skin was warm. "And now we are going to take away everything he has, starting with his business." He stepped back, giving me space. "Go to work, Lena. Be a cashier. I will handle the rest." I walked into the hospital, the cafeteria, the brightly lit basement that had once felt like my prison. But something was different. The air felt lighter. I could still smell the stale coffee, but beneath it, I could almost swear I smelled something else. That clean, cold scent of cedar. For the first time since my mother got sick, I did not feel hopelessly alone. I felt safe, and that, more than anything, terrified me. Safety, I was learning, was not an absence of threats. It was the presence of a perfect, methodical, and dangerous plan. And it was the scent of the man who made them. The wren earring in the plastic bag felt like a grenade. I had disarmed it by giving it to Ivy, but the pin felt like it was still in my hand. Sloan had breached the perimeter. He had bypassed Merrick, ignored the black sedans, and left his token of contempt on my car. He was telling Dorian, and me, that I was not safe. Dorian's response was silent and absolute. He did not send more guards. He moved me. He did not call it a safe house. He called it Winter Hall. It was an old Vale family estate, perched high on the cliffs north of Rust Harbor. The city was just a smear of industrial light below us, the port's yellow glare softened by distance and the thick, swirling snow that had begun to fall. The main house was a fortress of dark granite, but he did not take me there. He led me down a stone path to a separate structure, a massive, Victorian-era greenhouse. It was a glass cathedral in the middle of a blizzard. Inside, it was warm and humid, smelling of damp earth, jasmine, and old iron. It was the antithesis of the city's salt and rust. "You are not safe at Northbridge," he said, his voice quiet in the lush, green space. "Sloan knows your mother is your leverage." "He wouldn't hurt her," I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. "She is sick. He is a tool for the Wrens. They are stealing her medication. They do not operate on compassion. They operate on logistics, and you are a problem in their supply chain." He led me to a small alcove, furnished with a simple table and 2 iron chairs. "We are moving May here tomorrow, with a full medical team. Tonight, I'm securing your link to her." He was not just talking about my phone. He opened a hard-shell case and removed a small, white box, a satellite phone, and another device I did not recognize. He worked with a precise, methodical focus. His hands, which I'd only seen as steady and powerful, were also deft. He rewired the small box. "This is a priority alert," he explained. "It is linked to my system, not the phone lines. I am having Ivy install it by your mother's bed tonight. If she presses it, I will know before the police do." He was building a private, invisible fortress around my mother. He was anticipating the Wren's next move. I watched him work, the focused line of his brow, the way his cuff intermittently brushed the table. I was wrapped in his wool overcoat, but I was still shivering. The adrenaline from the last 48 hours had left my nerves raw. When he finished, he packed the case. He looked up and saw me, my arms wrapped around my middle, my shoulders hitched up to my ears. He did not say anything. He just walked to a small kitchenette, hidden behind a wall of ferns. I heard the sound of a copper kettle being filled, the click of a gas burner. A few minutes later, he returned with 2 heavy ceramic mugs. He was not a man who seemed to have cocoa in his vocabulary. Yet, he had made it from scratch. It was dark and rich, smelling of cinnamon, and absolutely nothing like the powdered mix from the hospital cafeteria. He handed me a mug. "Drink." I took it. The ceramic was hot, almost too hot, but I did not care. I wrapped my frozen fingers around it, letting the warmth soak into my palms. I took a sip. It was scalding, but the heat was a shock that grounded me. I felt a single, over-tightened muscle in my shoulder, finally, painfully, let go. He watched me, his own mug untouched on the table. He was assessing me, the same way he assessed a shipping manifest or a security flaw. "You're safe here," he said. "This place is all glass," I murmured, looking up at the snow hitting the panes. "Ballistic glass," he corrected, without missing a beat. "And the frame is reinforced steel. It just looks fragile." He gestured to a set of blueprints laid out on the table, the ones he had been studying when I arrived. "This is a tactical map of the estate." He was not just giving me shelter. He was giving me strategy. "You are here," he said, pointing to the greenhouse. "There are 2 primary exits. This one meant he pointed east. Leads to the main house cellar. This one, west. To the garages. The paths are heated. The snow will not stick. He was tracing the routes on the paper. His hand was next to mine. The floors are weighted. Merrick and Ivy monitor them from the main house. If you weigh more than 140 pounds and step off this primary path, they get an alert. You are weighing me. We are weighing intruders, he said. He looked at me. I know exactly what you weigh, Lena. I blushed. A hot, angry wave. He meant it clinically, but it felt intensely personal. He continued, his voice low. The safest route, if there is a breach, is this one. Through the garage, never the main house. It is designed to be a fortress, and it can just as easily be a trap. His finger, tracing the thin blue line on the paper, brushed the back of my hand. It was not a caress. It was a simple, accidental contact, but it was electric. A jolt went straight up my arm, and I inhaled sharply. My whole body, already strung tight, trembled. I did not pull my hand away. He stopped speaking. His finger rested, his skin against mine. For 1 second. 2. He felt the tremor. He knew I had not pulled back. He lifted his gaze from the map to my face. The silence in the greenhouse was absolute, broken only by the hiss of the snow against the glass. Why? I finally whispered. The lights, the cars, this place, moving my mother, this is not just protection, this is an occupation. Dorian pulled his hand back, but only to pick up his mug. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine over the rim. I am not a good man, Lena, he said. His voice was flat, a statement of fact, not a confession. Do not ever make the mistake of thinking that. I do not deal in charity. I do not run a rescue. But you are rescuing me. I am protecting what is mine, he said. When you grabbed my arm on that parking deck, you made a public claim. You put yourself in my world, and in my world, we do not let go. You are part of that now. The Wrens threatened a civilian. That is a problem for the city. They threatened you. That is a problem for me. The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified me. It should have made me run. But it was the most honest, stable thing I had heard in my entire life. We were standing near the threshold, the heavy iron door that led back out into the blizzard, the cold air from the doorway mixed with the greenhouse's humid warmth. He had defined the terms. He was not a hero. He was a shark, and I was in his territory. He set his mug down, and he was close, but he was always careful about his space. He lifted one hand, not to my face, but to the collar of his coat that I was still wearing. He gently turned the lapel, as if to fix it. You are cold, he said. It was not a question. I'm fine. No, you are not. He leaned in. It was slow, giving me every opportunity to back away. I did not move. I was frozen, not by fear, but by a paralyzing, breathless curiosity. His lips touched mine. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of punctuation. It was a brief, firm, warm pressure. It tasted faintly of cocoa and something metallic, like the night air. It was a question, an assessment, and a statement all in one. And then, just as quickly, he pulled back, only half a step, but the distance was a canyon. He had given me the choice. He had stated his terms, made his move, and now he was waiting for my answer. I did not think. For the first time in my life, I acted without a spreadsheet, without a plan, without weighing the cost. I was tired of being cold. I was tired of being afraid. I closed the distance. I put my hand on his chest, feeling the solid muscle through the expensive knit of his sweater. I leaned in, and this time, I kissed him. It was deeper. It was not desperate, but it was hungry. It was the first selfish thing I had done in years. I felt his surprise, a slight tensing of his muscles. Before he melted into it, his hand, which had been at his side, came up to my back, fingers splayed wide over my shoulder blade. He did not pull me, but he held me, anchoring me. My other hand came up, resting on his shoulder. I could feel the thud of his heart, steady and strong, beneath my palm. Our breathing, which had been separate and silent, was now a shared, shallow rhythm in the cold air. I could hear the soft, expensive rasp of his wool coat as my scrub jacket brushed against it. I tilted my head, and he angled his, and the world just stopped. There was no Sloan, no hospital, no debt. There was only the warmth of his mouth and the humid smell of jasmine and the solid, unshakable man in front of me. A phone vibrated. It was not a loud noise, but in the silence of the greenhouse, it was a gunshot. Dorian broke the kiss, but he did not let go. His hand was still on my back. He pulled his phone from his pocket with his free hand, his eyes still locked on mine, and he looked angry, not at me, but at the interruption. He flipped it open. Vale. He listened. The change was immediate. The man who had been kissing me vanished. The man who ran the port took his place. His eyes went cold, focused on a point past my shoulder. Where, he asked. A pause. How many? Another pause. Lock them down. I am on my way. He snapped the phone shut and looked at me. The warmth was gone, replaced by calculated ice. Merrick has eyes on them, he said. His voice clipped and fast. Harbor Gate is moving a refrigerated truck. It matches the profile for the stolen PHX-13. They are not using the port highway. They are routing it over the Evershade Bridge. He was already moving, grabbing my arm, pulling me toward the door. They are moving. Now. He grabbed my own coat from the hook where I had hung it. He did not toss it to me. He held it open. I slid my arms in, and he pulled the zipper up so fast the hiss was audible. He zipped it all the way to my chin, his knuckles brushing the underside of my jaw. He paused, his hands on my shoulders, his eyes drilled into mine. He was promising me something. Without a single word, this is not over. The snow was falling faster now, thick and heavy. As we stood in the doorway, a single, perfect snowflake drifted down and landed on my eyelashes. It was cold, a tiny pinprick of ice. I blinked, trying to clear it. Before I could, Dorian lifted his hand, not with his palm, but with the side of his index finger, the knuckle. He gently brushed the snowflake away. It was the most tender, delicate gesture I had ever experienced. A moment later, he was marching down the stone path, pulling me behind him toward the garage. The romance of the greenhouse was gone, replaced by the howl of the wind. Love in Rust Harbor, I realized, was not soft. It was not separate from the danger. It was tangled up in it. It tasted like cocoa and machine oil, and it moved at the speed of a steel-belted tire on its way to an ambush. This was his world, and I was holding his hand as we ran right into the middle of it. The garage at Winter Hall was not a garage. It was a command center. The sedans were gone. We got into a dark gray, nondescript SUV that looked like a civilian model but felt like a bank vault. The engine turned over with a low, menacing thrum. Ivy. What is the asset? Dorian said into a built-in microphone as we sped down the private, heated road. Refrigerated box truck, white, no markings, followed by a black pickup, no plates. Ivy's voice came back, crisp and clear through the speakers. That is Sloan. They are approaching the Evershade midpoint. Why the bridge? I asked, my voice tight. I was clutching the steel keychain in my pocket, my knuckles white. It is a bottleneck. Exactly, Dorian said, his eyes on the road, his driving fast but incredibly smooth. It is the only route from the industrial park that avoids the port's automated toll scanners. They think it is a blind spot. They are wrong. We crested a hill, and the Evershade Bridge spanned the black, icy river below us. It was a skeletal piece of old ironwork, and it was blocked. Two massive, bright yellow Vale Logistics maintenance trucks, their hazard lights flashing in a hypnotic orange rhythm, were parked diagonally across the two lanes, creating a perfect V shape. Floodlights, identical to the ones at the hospital, lit the scene. Merrick, in a Vale-branded hard hat and vest, was standing there, holding a digital scanner. The white box truck had been forced to a stop. Behind it, the black pickup idled, trapped. Dorian pulled the SUV to the side, blocking the only potential escape. A snap checkpoint, Dorian murmured. "We do this 3 times a month. Standard procedure to check our own fleet's seals. Perfectly legal." He got out. I got out with him, my heart hammering against my ribs. The wind on the bridge was a physical blow, trying to tear the breath from my lungs. Merrick was already at the back of the refrigerated truck, scanning the heavy steel locking bar. The driver, a large man in a Harbor Gate uniform, was protesting. "This is not a Vail truck. We are private. You cannot detain us." "Your route crosses our leased access road," Merrick said, his voice bored. "Our insurance requires we scan all heavy vehicles. Policy." He held up the scanner. The screen beeped, flashing red. "Seal replacement, not logged." "It was damaged," the driver blustered. "We replaced it." "With this," Merrick pointed to the small, cheap-looking plastic seal. "This is not one of ours, or one of yours. Open it." "You have no authority." Dorian stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He simply said, "Open the truck, or I will have Merrick cut the door off its hinges." The driver looked at Dorian, and he looked at Merrick, who was built like a vending machine. He looked at the 2 maintenance trucks blocking his path. He swore, fumbled for his keys, and unlocked the bar. Merrick and another Vail worker pulled the heavy doors open. A wave of frigid air washed out. Inside, it was not a truckload of pharmaceuticals. It was a jumble of old computer towers, broken monitors, and tangled cables. "E-waste," the driver sneered. "Happy." Dorian's eyes narrowed. He stepped up into the truck, pulling a flashlight from his coat. He swept the beam over the junk, and there, in the center, was a single, silver micro-cold storage container. It was the size of a large suitcase, high-tech and sleek, plugged into a portable battery pack. Sloan had gotten out of his pickup. He was standing 20 feet away, a sick, confident grin on his face. The snow swirled around him. He saw me standing behind Dorian. "Well, look at that," he called out, his voice thin in the wind. "You picked a hell of a babysitter. Lena, does he tuck you in at night, too?" I flinched. Dorian did not even look at him. His entire focus was on the container. He motioned to Merrick, who unlatched the micro-fridge. He lifted the lid. It was empty. Just perfectly molded, gray anti-shock foam. Sloan burst out laughing, a raw, ugly sound that echoed off the iron beams. "You are slow, Vail. You are too damn slow. You really think we would move it all in one go." A diversion. The entire thing was a setup to make us show our hand. "A misdirection," Dorian said, his voice dangerously quiet. He ran a gloved finger along the empty foam cutout. He turned to me. "What do you see?" I stepped closer, my mind racing. What I looked at the container, the truck, the e-waste, it was just junk. "Lena, look," he commanded. I forced myself to think, to see. I looked at the rubber gasket on the lid of the empty micro-fridge. It was supposed to be a perfect, sterile black seal, but it was not. There was a fine, reddish-brown powder caked into the grooves. "It is dust," I said. "What kind?" I looked closer, then rubbed a tiny bit between my fingers. It was gritty, fine, and stained my skin a deep, rusty color. I knew this color. I had seen it my whole life on the east side of town. "Red clay," I whispered, my heart jumping. "It is red clay dust. It is from Ash Quarry, the old abandoned quarry. They use it as an illegal dump. But there are storage bunkers there, left over from the war." Sloan's smile vanished. He had heard me. "That is where the real shipment is," Dorian said. He turned to Merrick. "You are done here. Let them go." "Boss," Merrick looked confused. "Let them go!" Sloan scrambled back to his pickup. The Harbor Gate driver slammed the truck doors, his face pale. Merrick, looking furious, motioned for the maintenance trucks to move. They backed up, opening the lane. The white truck squealed as it took off, but Sloan's pickup did not follow. It spun around, tires smoking, and sped off in the opposite direction, back the way it had come. He was running. He was running to the quarry. Ivy. Dorian said into his collar mic as we ran back to the SUV. He's heading for Ash Quarry. Cut him off. All routes. Lock the grid. Copy, her voice replied. Locking. We were in the SUV and moving in seconds, the tires screaming as Dorian executed a perfect 180-degree turn on the narrow bridge. This was not a chase. It was a hunt. Ivy has the traffic lights, Dorian said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was not looking at the GPS. He was just driving. His knowledge of the city's arteries absolute. She is turning every light red in his path, forcing him east, away from the highway. We cut through a warehouse district, the SUV handling the sharp turns like a sports car. Up ahead, I saw the black pickup. Sloan was driving like a maniac, swerving, running a light that had just turned red. He is fast, I breathed. He is desperate, Dorian corrected. He's not watching his mirrors. He's just running. Ivy, I need the service road at Kilo 7. It is blocked. A water main broke this morning. It is a ditch. Perfect, Dorian said. He did not speed up. He just angled. He took a side street I did not know existed, bumping over a set of abandoned railway tracks. We were now running parallel to Sloan. Sloan saw us. He tried to turn, but Ivy must have locked the intersection. A garbage truck was suddenly blocking his path. He swore, swerved, and took the only route left, the Kilo 7 service road. We emerged right behind him. The service road was a mess of mud and deep, icy water. Sloan hit the water too fast. The pickup hydroplaned, spun in a slow, graceful arc, and slid backward into the flooded ditch. It was stuck, the engine sputtering and dying with a wet cough. It was a perfect, bloodless takedown. No guns, no collision, just logistics. Dorian pulled up 20 yards away. Sloan threw his door open, water rushing into his cab. He was not giving up. He scrambled up the muddy bank on the far side. I saw it then. A motorcycle, a dirt bike, stashed in the trees, his escape plan. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out keys. Something else came out. It was small and black. It fell into the mud. He did not notice. He got the bike started with a furious kick, and with a high-pitched whine. He was gone, disappearing into the woods where the SUV could not follow. Dorian did not pursue. He just watched him go, his face grim. He got out of the car, walked over to the mud bank, and bent down. He picked up the object Sloan had dropped. It was a small, cheap pager. He clicked it on. The screen was cracked, but it lit up. There was only one message on it, a calendar appointment for tomorrow night. Gala, Ferrymore, 9 p.m. He pocketed it, the evidence. He walked to the abandoned pickup, now half submerged. He opened the passenger door and pulled a stack of labels from the glove box. They were decals, white, with a blue eagle. Federal Commerce Bureau. I read. Property of the FCB? The real shipment is at Ash Quarry, Dorian said, his voice like ice. Ivy will have a team there in 5 minutes, but this is the real prize. He held up the pager. Sloan was just a dog. This tells us where to find his master. He looked at the fake labels, his jaw tight. Stealing from the sick. They crossed a line. They put you in danger. They will. His words were cut off by a buzz. It was not his phone. It was mine. I pulled it from my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. My blood turned to ice. It was a picture. It was my mother. She was asleep in her bed. In my apartment, the light from the broken street lamp was painting a stripe across her face. And stuck into the wooden door frame, right next to her head, was a single, long, black pin. A pin with a delicate, dark feather attached, a wren's feather. The message beneath it was just 4 words. We can always reach you. I could not breathe. My vision tunneled. They had been in my house. They had stood over my mother while she slept. Dorian saw my face. He took the phone from my shaking hand. He looked at the picture. For a full second, he did not move. He did not breathe. A profound, terrifying stillness came over him. The cold, calculating businessman was gone. The man who kissed me in the greenhouse was gone. The man standing in front of me was someone else entirely, someone I had not seen before. "Merrick," he said into his mic, his voice a low, lethal whisper. "Scrub the quarry mission, full recall, all hands to Northbridge. Now, I want May Hart moved to Winter Hall. Full medical escort. I want a 24/7 team on her. I want the apartment stripped, swept, and sealed. Go." He turned to me. He put his hands on my shoulders. His grip was iron. "Lena, listen to me. She is fine. They did not hurt her. This was a message, a desperate one." "They were there. I sobbed. They, oh God, They were," he said, his voice terrible in its calm. "And it is the last mistake they will ever make. They had a logistical advantage. Now they have made it personal." He put me back in the SUV. He got in the driver's seat. "This is over," he said. He was not talking to me. He was making a vow. "We are not chasing their trucks anymore. We are not hitting their storage. We are going to the head." He held up the pager. "Ferrymore Island, the casino, that is where the Wrens, Harbor Gate, and the FCB all meet. That is where their network connects." He put the car in gear. "They wanted to prove they could reach you. I am going to prove I can burn their entire world to the ground." My mother was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. She was at Winter Hall, in a room that looked like a 5-star hotel suite, with a full-time nurse and 2 of Dorian's men outside her door. The terror from the wren feather had solidified into a cold, hard rage. They had threatened my mother. They had invaded my home. They had made it personal. And now, Dorian was making it tactical. "The Port Hearts Fund," Dorian said, reviewing an invitation. We were in his office at Pier 19, the port's yellow lights bleeding in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "It is the pet charity of Rust Harbor's elite. They hold a gala every year at the Ferrymore Island Casino." "The pager," I said. "Ferrymore." "Exactly. The Wrens, Harbor Gate, and their friends use this gala as a public display of their generosity. They wash their reputations, not just their money. They donate a fraction of what they steal and are celebrated as heroes for it." He tapped the invitation. "Vail Logistics is now a platinum sponsor. We have a VIP table for tomorrow night. You are just buying your way in. Charity is the most effective cover for a hostile takeover," he said, not looking up. "You will be coming with me." My stomach dropped. "To a casino, a gala, Dorian, look at me. I am a cafeteria cashier." "Tonight," he said, his voice absolute, "you are an American Sign Language interpreter. The Port Hearts Fund is honoring a deaf community activist this year. Your presence is not only plausible, it is required. You will be my guest, officially translating for the fund's honorees." He looked at me then, his eyes intense. "Ivy has been training you. You know the signs." He was not talking about ASL. For the past 24 hours, Ivy had been drilling me. We had created a new language, a set of covert signals woven into traditional ASL. A slight adjustment to the sign for grateful meant target is moving. The sign for community could be altered to mean camera is active. The chalkmark Wren had been a clue I found by accident. Tonight, my hands would be a weapon I wielded on purpose. The dress was a deep, ink blue silk. It was not revealing, but it clung to every line of my body as if it were liquid. It left my arms and shoulders bare, my hands free to move when I was ready. Dorian was waiting at the bottom of the stairs at Winter Hall. He was in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked less like a guest and more like the man who owned the building. He did not compliment me. He just watched me descend, his eyes tracing the line of the dress, his expression unreadable. He held out his arm. This time, I did not grab it in panic. I placed my hand on his forearm, and the gesture felt deliberate, a conscious alliance. Ferrymore Island was a monument to bad taste and old money, a glittering palace of glass and noise rising from the black. Icy water, the ballroom was suffocating, a sea of diamonds and fake smiles, the air thick with perfume and the sound of a string quartet. Dorian was a different person here. He moved through the crowd with an easy, inherited grace. He was greeted by name. He was the legitimate face of Vail Logistics, the city's golden boy, the man who had just donated a six-figure sum to the fund. "Mr. Vale," a man said, shaking his hand. "Good to see you taking an interest." The man's name tag read Severin Locke, the Harbor Gate executive. He did not recognize me. To him, I was just another accessory. And then I saw him. Garrick Sloan. When he was not in his dirty canvas jacket, he was wearing an ill-fitting security uniform, a Harbor Gate patch on his shoulder. He was standing by an exit, his eyes dead, until they found me. He walked over, his path cutting directly in front of a city councilman. He was arrogant, protected. He stopped in front of us, his gaze dripping with contempt as he looked at my hand on Dorian's arm. "A big night for you," he sneered, his voice low. "Playing princess? You clean up nice." Dorian's body went utterly still, but he did not look at Sloan. He was watching someone else across the room. Sloan focused on me. "That arm you are holding so tight," he whispered. "Tonight, that hand is going to let go. You will see. He cannot protect you in here." The old Lena would have shrunk. The old Lena would have frozen. I leaned in, my voice just as quiet, my smile never wavering. "It will let go, Garrick, only when I do not need it anymore." His smirk faltered. He had expected fear, not ice. Before he could respond, Dorian turned his head, a look of mild annoyance on his face, as if shooing away a fly. "Do you have a purpose?" Sloane's face darkened, but a voice cut through the tension. "Severin, Mr. Sloan, please. We do not bother our benefactors." A woman approached. She was in her 50s, radiating a power that made the room feel small. She wore a white suit, and a heavy gold pin in the shape of a wren was on her lapel. Her hair was silver. Her smile was polished steel. "Rowena Pike," and she said, extending a hand to Dorian. "I am the chair of the Port Hearts Fund. We are so grateful for your sudden and generous contribution, Mr. Vale." This was the master. This was the FCB. Sloan was her dog, Locke her manager. "Business has been good," Dorian said, his smile just as polished. He shook her hand. "Vale Logistics believes in giving back. We are interested in expanding our clean logistic investments. We find there is a growing market for transparent, fully audited shipping." It was a chess move. He was offering an alliance and a threat in one sentence. Rowena's smile did not waver. "A noble goal, Mr. Vale, but commerce, I find, often requires men who know when to close their eyes. It is how things get done efficiently." She turned to me. "And you must be Miss Hart, the interpreter. Such a wonderful skill." Her eyes were bright and intelligent, and completely empty. The program started. We were led to our VIP table, near the front. As we walked, Dorian guided me through the crowd. At one point, just as we passed under a black security dome in the ceiling, his hand moved from my elbow to the small of my back. His palm was warm against the bare skin. The touch was possessive, public. It made my breath catch. Everyone who saw it would assume one thing, but I felt his thumb press once, twice. A signal. Ivy, camera blind. I lifted my hand, pretending to smooth my hair, and made a quick, complex sign. Target 5, Rowena, moving to patio. And it was a signal for Merrick, who was outside, monitoring communications. We sat, the program droned on, speeches, awards. A man was brought to our table and introduced. "Mr. Vale, this is our head medical advisor for our charitable endeavors, Dr. Casper Niles." I looked at him. He was a small, nervous man in a rumpled suit, his eyes magnified by thick glasses. He looked utterly out of place, like a field mouse at a table of snakes. His eyes, when they met mine, were not empty. They were terrified. He was the Harbor Gate medical advisor. He was the one who knew exactly what PHX-13 was and who was not getting it. "A pleasure, Doctor," Dorian said, shaking his hand. Yes, an honor," Niles stammered. "What you are all doing, the fund, it is—" He seemed lost. The lights dimmed for a video presentation. Niles, who had been lingering, seemed to stumble. He bumped my chair, his hand grabbing the armrest to steady himself. "Oh, goodness," he whispered, his face flushing. "My apologies. Miss Hart, so clumsy." He righted himself and hurried away. I felt something small and hard in the pocket of my dress, a pocket I did not even know was there. It was a tiny memory card. I kept my hands in my lap. My heart was a drum. I looked at Niles, who was now at the back of the ballroom, wringing his hands, pretending to watch the presentation. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. They were not just scared, they were pleading. "It is time." I needed to get the card to Dorian. I turned to him, but he was deep in a hushed conversation with Severin Locke, all smiles and business. I could not interrupt. I waited. The dinner ended, the dancing began. Dorian stood and, without a word, held his hand out to me. I took it. He led me to the dance floor. The string quartet was playing something slow and agonizing. "Report," he murmured, his voice in my ear, his hand firmly on the small of my back, holding me closer than was proper. "Niles," I whispered, my lips brushing his cheek. "He bumped into me. He dropped something in my pocket, a memory card." Dorian did not react. He just kept dancing, moving us slowly toward the terrace doors. "Sloane is watching us. Locke is watching us. Rowena is watching us. Give it to me." "How?" "Put your hand on my chest," he ordered. I did, my palm resting over his heart. It was beating a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. "Now," he murmured, "act like you are in love. Fix my tie." My fingers trembled. I reached up with my other hand, the one holding the card between two fingers. I fumbled with the knot of his black tie, my knuckles brushing his throat. I felt him inhale. Under the cover of the gesture, I pressed the tiny card into the V of his waistcoat. He did not flinch, just closed his hand over mine for a second, enclosing my fingers and the card, before pulling his hand away as if to smooth his own lapel. It was done. "Good girl," he whispered. We danced for another minute, a perfect, calculated display of intimacy. Then he spun me out, caught my hand, and led me off the floor. "Ivy has it," he said. We returned to the table. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated in my clutch, a text from a number I did not know. "One distribution ledger, PHX 13, confirms Quarry and 3 other sites. 2 patient lists, 34 names, all dialysis patients at St. Aurelian. All had treatment delayed due to supply chain shortages in the last 2 weeks. 3 video file. Rowena Pike, meeting Sloane. She's giving the order. He's a Port Authority inspector. He sees everything. Make him disappear." The file is dated 1 year ago. The inspector she is talking about. He was found in the harbor 2 days later. My blood went cold. She was not just a thief. She was a killer. And Sloane was her executioner. I looked up. Rowena Pike was at the podium, smiling, accepting an award for her humanitarian work in Rust Harbor. Across the room, Sloane was watching me, his hand on the radio at his hip. He knew I knew. The game was over. The conspiracy was real. And I was in the center of the ballroom with the killer and her henchmen. My mind was a roaring storm of images, the video of Rowena, the patient list, Sloane's dead-eyed smirk. He was a killer. She was a queen. And I was trapped in the ballroom with them. Dorian leaned close, his lips brushing my ear, his voice a low vibration that only I could hear. "The data is streaming to a dead man's switch. Merrick has the exits. It is time to leave." As if his words were the trigger. A new sound cut through the music. It was not a loud, panicked bell, but a piercing, high-frequency whoop. Whoop! Whoop! The soft, golden lights of the ballroom died, replaced by the stark, pulsing red of emergency strobes. "A technical difficulty," a calm voice announced over the intercom. "Please remain calm. We are investigating a minor electrical fault." "Vale's technical difficulties are always precise," Dorian murmured. He stood, pulling me to my feet with a single, firm tug on my hand. "Walk, Lena. Do not run." The crowd was a confused mass of tuxedos and gowns. People were standing, looking around, annoyed rather than frightened. Across the room, I saw Sloan. He was not confused. He was energized. He barked into his shoulder radio, his eyes scanning, and then they found us. He saw us moving, not toward the main lobby, but to a set of glass doors leading to a side terrace. He started to move, pushing through the chaos. "Lock down the exits," he shouted into his radio. Dorian pulled me through the glass doors, and we were in a long, narrow corridor. It was walled entirely in glass, overlooking the black, churning sea. The wind-driven rain lashed at the panes, far in the distance. The lights of Rust Harbor looked like a fallen galaxy, a smear of glittering diamonds. "He is coming," I said, looking back. Sloan had reached the corridor and was fighting with the doors. "Merrick," Dorian said, his voice quiet. The heavy glass doors at the end of the hall, the ones we were running toward, slid shut with a heavy, final thud. The magnetic locks clicked, sealing us in. "We are trapped," I gasped, pulling against his hand. "He is," Dorian corrected, never breaking stride. He was pulling me toward a different door, a steel one marked stairs. "Behind us!" Sloan roared. He was locked out of the stairwell. He looked at us through the glass, then at the ocean. He disappeared from my view. Where did he go? "He's taking the maintenance catwalk," Dorian said, pulling me into the stairwell. It was gray, concrete, and echoed with our footsteps. He knows the building better than we do. The roof is our only defensible position. We burst through the final door at the top of the stairs, and the world exploded. The wind hit me like a physical blow, ripping the breath from my lungs. We were on the roof, a vast, flat expanse of black tar and humming ventilation units. The salt spray was so thick it was like walking through a cloud, stinging my eyes. The steel door clanged open behind me. I spun around. Sloan stood there, his cheap security jacket flapping wildly in the gale. He was breathing hard, a sick, triumphant smile on his face. In his hand was a black, snub-nosed handgun. "Nowhere to run, princess," he yelled over the wind. "No more bodyguards, no more fancy dresses." He raised the gun, his hand shaking, but his eyes were steady. "The boss says you are a loose end." I backed away, my heel hitting a metal grate. "Where is he?" Sloan screamed, his eyes darting around the rooftop. "Where is your big man?" "He's right here." Dorian's voice. He was not in front of me. He was standing near the edge of the roof, having emerged from a different access panel. He was a black silhouette against the distant, glittering lights of the city. He had shed his tuxedo jacket somewhere, and he was methodically pulling on a pair of thin, black leather gloves, stretching the material over each finger. Sloan spun, startled. "Vale, you should have stayed at the party." "I am not here for the party," Dorian said. He began to walk forward, not fast, just a steady, relentless pace. He was not looking at the gun. He was looking at Sloan's eyes. "I will shoot you, I swear to God," Sloan screamed, his voice cracking. He aimed the gun at Dorian's chest. "Go ahead," Dorian said, his voice cutting through the wind. He did not stop walking. Sloan's bravado was crumbling. He was a bully, a henchman. He was not a killer in a fair fight. He took a step back, the gun wavering. Dorian was 10 feet away, then 5. He was close enough to touch the barrel of the gun. "You came into her house," Dorian said, his voice a low, lethal whisper. "You touched her car. You threatened her mother." Sloan's face was pale. He was trembling. He tried to pull the trigger. Dorian moved. It was a blur. His gloved hand shot out, not for the gun but for Sloan's wrist. He gripped it, twisted it. The sound of bone popping was sharp, ugly. The gun clattered to the tar. Sloan screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound. Dorian's other hand came up, not a fist, but an open palm. He struck Sloan in the throat. Sloan gurgled, choking, his eyes wide with terror. Dorian did not let him fall. He grabbed Sloan's chin with his gloved hand, a mirror of his action on the bridge. But this was no feint. He forced Sloan's head up, their faces inches apart. "In Rust Harbor," Dorian hissed. The words ripped away by the wind. The men who touch patients, the men who touch their families, they cease to exist. "You are just a slogan," Sloan choked out, blood and spittle on his lips. "Just a businessman." "I am," Dorian agreed, "and this is me, writing you off." A shadow detached itself from the stairwell door. Merrick. He had been there the whole time. Sloan saw him, his eyes wide with a new, final panic. He tried to lurch away from Dorian. There was a flat, dull thwack. Merrick had fired a single rubber bullet from a riot gun. It hit Sloan squarely in the knee. His leg disintegrated beneath him. He went down, screaming, and Merrick was on him, a knee in his back, cinching his hands with heavy zip ties. It was done. Clinical, brutal. Dorian stood for a moment, breathing hard, the adrenaline visible in the rigid line of his shoulders. He watched Merrick haul the sobbing, cuffed Sloan back toward the stairs. Then he turned to me. I was frozen. My silk dress was plastered to my skin, my hair a wet, tangled mess. The wind was trying to tear me from the roof. He was the most terrifying, beautiful thing I had ever seen. The space between us was an electric wire. I did not run to him this time. I was too stunned. He crossed the distance. He stopped in front of me, his chest rising and falling. He was breathing as hard as I was. And then I was moving. I lunged forward, my arms wrapping around his neck, my fingers digging into his hair. I did not just hug him. I clung to him, sobbing, a raw, primal sound of relief that was torn from my throat. His arms snapped around me like a steel trap, crushing me to him. He buried his face in my hair, his body shielding me from the wind. "I have you," he growled, the words a vibration against my skull. "Lena, you are safe. I have you." I pulled back just enough to see his face, his dark eyes frantic, and I kissed him. It was not the cautious exploration in the greenhouse. This was a collision. It was desperate, and it was raw, and it was possessive. It was all the fear of the last week, all the anger at Sloan, all the terror for my mother. It was a kiss that tasted like salt and iron and the storm. He kissed me back, his mouth hard, answering my desperation with a dark, claiming hunger. One of his hands tangled in my hair, gripping the back of my head, holding me fast. His other arm was a vice around my waist, lifting me against him until my feet were barely on the ground. Our breathing was a ragged, shared gasp. The world was gone. There was no roof, no wind, no alarm. There was only this. It was too much. I broke the kiss, but I could not let go. I pressed my face into the warm, solid column of his throat, resting my forehead against his pulse. I could feel his heart hammering, a wild, frantic rhythm that matched my own. He just held me, his hand stroking my hair, his body trembling. Or maybe I was the one trembling. I could not tell. Our chests were pressed together, rising and falling in the same ragged rhythm. His arm, the one around my waist, tightened, then eased. Just a fraction. It was a question. "Are you okay?" I nodded, a small, tight movement against his skin. I did not have the air to speak. He held me until the shaking subsided, until the distant sound of sirens, real ones. This time joined the howl of the wind. He leaned back, and I saw his tuxedo jacket, the one he had shed, lying on the tar. He picked it up and wrapped it around my shoulders. It was heavy, soaked, but it was a shield. He cupped my face, his leather-gloved thumbs stroking my cheekbones. He rested his forehead against mine. "After tonight," he said, his voice thick, "no one touches you again. I swear it." A new sound, a vibration. Dorian swore, a low, frustrated sound. He pulled a different phone from his pocket. Ivy. "What?" he answered. He listened. The adrenaline-fueled warmth in his face vanished, replaced by cold, hard ice. "Where?" A pause. "Understood. Lock down the harbor." He snapped the phone shut and looked at me. The fight was not over. It was not even close. "What?" I whispered. Ivy was tracking Rowena. She did not use the stairs. She did not use the elevator. She used a private service tunnel. "You lost her." "No," he said. his jaw tight. "We found her. She's on a boat, a high-speed service launch, the Night Lark." He pointed out, past the edge of the roof, toward the dark, glittering expanse of the port. "She's not running, she's heading for her prize." Rowena was going to her shipment, she was going to the medicine. Dorian looked at me, his eyes searching my face. He saw the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger that matched his own. "Lena," he said, his voice deadly serious, "when I say hold, I hold to the end." I did not speak. I just reached into the pocket of my sodden dress. My fingers, cold and numb, found the hard, steel edges of the keychain. I closed my fist around it. "Hold?" He saw the gesture. He nodded. A single, sharp movement. "Let's go," he said, pulling me to the stairs. "Let's go finish this." We did not go back to Winter Hall. We drove to the heart of the Vale territory, Pier 19, the SUV gliding into a cavernous, dark warehouse. The adrenaline from the rooftop was gone, leaving behind a cold, shaking exhaustion. The silk dress was still damp, and Dorian's tuxedo jacket felt like a lead blanket. "Ivy is analyzing the rest of the data from Casper's card," Dorian said. His voice clipped. It was all business again. The man who had held me on the roof temporarily gone. There was a second hidden partition. It is heavily encrypted. He led me into his office, the glass wall overlooking the skeletal cranes of the port. He handed me a secure tablet. "She just broke it. You need to see this." I took the tablet. The first file was a signed affidavit from Dr. Casper Niles. It was a whistleblower report. He detailed how Harborgate had forced him to sign off on false manifests, how they had blackmailed him, threatening his family. He was not just scared, he was a man in a cage. He had been feeding this information to an internal watchdog I had never heard of, the Port Integrity Commission, the PIC. "They are feds," I whispered, a sick feeling rising in my stomach. "A shadow agency," Dorian corrected. "They have no official power, just oversight. They are investigators. In my world, that is the same thing as a cop." His voice was hard. I kept reading. Niles's affidavit detailed his recruitment, the PIC agent who had found him, who had convinced him to turn, who had been building the case against Rowena Pike for years. The agent was operating under a code name. But in the last file, a secured text log between Niles and his handler, there was a name. "My contact, the man who started this, Jonah Hart." The tablet slipped. It did not fall, but my hands went numb. I stared at the name. "Jonah Hart, my father." "That is not possible," I whispered. The room, the high-tech office, the distant lights of the port, all of it started to tilt. "My father is dead." He has been dead for 7 years. A boating accident, lost at sea. I remembered the memorial, the empty casket, the suffocating grief that had fueled every day of my life, every extra shift, every dollar I scraped together for my mother. "He died," I insisted, my voice rising. "The file says otherwise," Dorian said, his voice quiet, watching me. I could not breathe. The air in the room was too thick, too heavy. The world was dissolving. My father was alive. My entire life, my entire motivation, the bedrock of my grief was a lie. I was suffocating. I made a small, choking sound. I was falling, and the floor was nowhere to be found. Dorian moved. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not offer condolences. He just acted. He crossed the room in 2 strides, took the tablet from my lifeless hands, and put it on the desk. Then he did something I did not expect. He reached out and placed his open palm flat against my sternum, right over my heart. His hand was heavy. It was warm, solid, an anchor in the storm that was ripping me apart. "Breathe. Lena," he commanded, his voice a low, steady vibration that traveled from his palm into my bones. "You are hyperventilating. Feel my hand. Breathe with me. Slow, in, now out." I stared into his dark, intense eyes. My vision blurred with tears I had not shed. I focused on the pressure of his hand, the solid, grounding reality of it. I felt his own chest rise and fall, a slow, deliberate rhythm. I forced my lungs to match it. In. Out. The roaring in my ears faded. The room stabilized. "He is dead," I whispered, the words a plea. "This data says he is not," Dorian replied, his voice flat. "It says he is the one who has been building this case from the inside." As if summoned, the secure phone Ivy had taken from Casper's pocket, the one now sitting on Dorian's desk, began to ring. It was a high-pitched, digital trill. We both stared at it. "It is Casper's line," I said, my voice hoarse. "The one he used to talk to his handler." "Answer it," Dorian said. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. I pressed the button. "Hello?" Silence. Just static and the faint sound of wind. Then a voice, rougher than I remembered, scarred by years I knew nothing about, thick with static. "Lena?" The breath I had just found was stolen again. I would know that voice anywhere. "Dad?" "Lena? Oh, God, baby girl." The voice was strained, hurried. "Listen to me. There is no time. Casper did his part. You got the files." "You are alive," I choked out, the words a raw accusation. "You are alive. We buried you. Mom, we mourned you for 7 years." "I know," he rasped, and I heard the pain in his voice. "I had to protect you both. Rowena, she was arranging accidents. My name was next on her list. I knew it. So I arranged my own. I had to go dark. Lena, I had to disappear. Become a ghost, just to get close enough to burn her network from the inside." You let us?" "There is no time," he repeated, cutting me off. "It is happening. Tonight, meet me. 2 a.m. Havenspine Light Tower. Come alone." "Dad, Lena, listen to your father. Come alone. And daughter. Do not bring guns. Just bring the truth. We end this tonight." The line went dead. I stood in the silent office, the phone in my hand, my entire world remade. My father was alive. He was a ghost, an investigator, and he was out there, in the storm. I told Dorian the plan. His face hardened. "Havenspine. It is a kill box, completely exposed, and he is Pick. They are feds, investigators. Vale does not work with cops. Lena, ever. It is the first rule." "He's not a cop," I argued, my own strength returning, the shock replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "He is my father, and he is the only one who knows how to stop her. I am going." Dorian looked at me for a long, heavy moment. I saw the conflict in his eyes, his code, his ironclad rule, warring with the promise he had made me on the roof. He was trapped. "I will not meet with a federal agent," Dorian said finally, "but you will not go alone. I will be your shadow. I will be in the dark. If he is lying, if this is a trap, I will end it." He was breaking his own rule. He was compromising his entire organization. He was not doing it for the mission or for the intel on Rowena. He was doing it for me. At 2 a.m, the Havenspine Light Tower was the loneliest place on Earth. The wind howled, a physical force that threatened to peel me from the metal catwalk. The massive light above swept in a slow circle, cutting a path through the rain, illuminating the black, churning sea below before plunging us back into darkness. I stood alone, my anger and my grief and my hope a toxic, confusing storm inside me. A shape detached itself from the heavy machinery at the base of the light. He was older, so much older. The 7 years had been hard on him. His face was a map of stress and sun, his hair gray. He was wearing docker's clothes, and his hands. His hands were stained, the nails broken, covered in oil and grease. This was not the man who had taught me to ride a bike. This was a different person, a ghost who smelled of the harbor. "Lena," he said. "Dad." He stepped into the sweeping light, and I saw his eyes. They were the same. "You look just like May." "Why?" The word was all I had. 7 years. We had a funeral. I held her hand while we put an empty box in the ground. "Why?" "Rowena Pike," he said, his voice flat. "She owned the port. She still does. She was cleaning house, arranging accidents for anyone who saw too much. My name was next. I knew it. So I staged my own. I had to. It was the only way to protect you, to make you safe. I had to disappear so I could get deep inside, work the docs under a fake name, and build the case that would finally sink her. The gala, I said, the data. The gala was a diversion, he said, shaking his head. She knew you were a threat. She knew Vale was watching. She flushed you all out. The Nightlark, I said, remembering Ivy's call. She escaped on it. It is not an escape boat, Lena. He said, a grim look on his face. It is the prize. It is a custom-fitted, high-speed refrigerated transport, all the PHX-13, all the pharmaceuticals they have stolen for the last 6 months. It is all on that boat. She's moving her entire nest egg, right under our noses. He looked past me, into the darkness. He knew I had not come alone. Vale, he called out over the wind. I know you are there. Show yourself. Dorian emerged from the shadow of a generator, silent as the fog. He did not look at my father. He looked at the sea. My father nodded, a grudging respect. I know who you are. I do not care about your business. You protected my daughter. That is all that matters. He looked from me to Dorian, a father, making a plea to the man who now held his daughter's life in his hands. I have one thing to ask you, Jonah said, his voice raw. When this is over, get her out of the city. Take her somewhere safe. Rowena's network is deep. Even if she goes down, they will never stop hunting Lena. Dorian looked at me. The choice was mine. No, I said, my voice firm. I am not running. I am not disappearing. I am not you. Dad, I am staying. We finish this. My father looked pained, but he nodded. Stubborn, just like your mother. I stepped forward. I did not know what to do, so I hugged him. It was awkward, stiff. He smelled of diesel fuel, salt, and 7 years of lies. But he was warm. He was real. My father. I hate you for what you did, I whispered into his rough jacket. But I am so glad you are alive. I know, baby girl, he whispered back, his arms crushing me. I know. I glanced over my shoulder. Dorian had turned away, giving us the moment, his back to us as he stared out at the dark harbor. It was a profound, unexpected gesture of respect. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. What now? Jonah looked at Dorian. She thinks she is clever. She thinks she has won. The Nightlark is not going to open sea. She is heading for Blind Berth 7. It is the only deep-water berth in the harbor that is not on any official Port Authority map. It is where she unloads her stolen goods. He looked at the sky. The rain was stopping. A faint, sick gray was appearing on the horizon. She will be there at sunrise, my father said. Dorian turned, his face a mask of cold calculation. Blind Berth 7. That is Vale territory. I know, Jonah said. You have the home field advantage. She has the product, and she has the arrogance to believe she is untouchable. Dorian looked at me. The final objective was set. The final battle was coming. Sunrise, Dorian said. Blind Berth 7. The air at sunrise was not clean. It was cold, gray, and smelled of rust, diesel, and the metallic tang of the coming day. Blind Berth 7 was a skeleton, a long-forgotten pier of rotting wood and creaking iron. It was the perfect invisible place. We were not the only ones there. Dorian's team, invisible in the pre-dawn gloom, had been working for 2 hours. This was his territory, and he was setting a trap. Ivy and her technicians had threaded pressure sensors under the pier planks, calibrated to the weight of a high-speed launch. They were linked to the massive, ancient storm lights on the derelict loading cranes. The PIC data packet is live, Ivy murmured into her comms, her voice a ghost in my earpiece. Casper's evidence, all of it was just uploaded to their anonymous server. The feds were coming, but they were not Dorian's allies. They were the janitors, summoned by a fire alarm they did not know he had pulled. My father, Jonah, was somewhere in the superstructure of the main crane, a ghost in his own right, waiting. And I was with Dorian, tucked in the shadow of a shipping container, watching the gray water. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I was still wearing the silk gala dress, now torn and stained, with Dorian's heavy tuxedo jacket wrapped around me. The Nightlark appeared out of the mist. It was not a boat, it was a blade, a sleek, gray, high-speed launch that cut through the water with almost no wake. It slid against the pier, the sensors triggering silently. Rowena Pike stepped onto the dock. She was arrogance personified. She wore a long, pristine white coat, buttoned up like a doctor's, as if she were here to heal, not to kill. She was flanked by 2 harbor gate men in full tactical gear. She carried a single, silver, encrypted briefcase. She smiled, breathing in the salt air, a queen surveying her conquered territory. "She is waiting for her ground transport," Dorian whispered, his voice in my ear. Suddenly, a series of bright red flares shot into the sky. Arcing over the eastern edge of the port, they exploded in silent, crimson bursts. "Diversion," Ivy's voice said, sharp and sudden. "Merrick, East Gantry, you have movement, 4, maybe 5 targets, using the flares as cover." I heard Merrick swear, a low, frustrated growl. He was forced to move, to leave his primary post to counter the flank. Rowena saw the flares. She saw the shadow of Merrick repositioning. A small, satisfied smirk touched her lips. She thought Dorian's flank was exposed. She thought she had outplayed him. She did not know that was not the real diversion. A heavy door slammed open from a shadowed Vale SUV, parked near the berth entrance. It was the transport vehicle. "He is loose!" a Vale man shouted. Garrick Sloan burst out of the darkness. He was not in his security uniform. He was in prison transport scrubs, his hands cuffed in front of him, or they had been. The heavy zip ties were snapped, dangling from one wrist. He had a small, bloody piece of wax in his mouth, the key. He was screaming, a high, incoherent sound of pure rage. He was a rabid dog, let off the leash. And he was running, not at Rowena, not at Dorian. He was running at me. I had time to gasp, that was all. Then he was 10 feet away, his face a mask of hate, his hands reaching for my throat. I did not scream. I did not step back. I reached out, my fingers finding Dorian's hand in the shadows. I gripped it, hard. "Hold!" Dorian did not look at Sloan. He looked at me. He did not step forward to block the attack. He pulled. He spun me, a violent 180-degree turn. Yanking me off my feet and behind him, I became a part of his motion. Sloan, lunging at the space where I had been, crashed into Dorian's unmoving back. Dorian's arm came up, not a punch, but a python. He snaked his forearm under Sloan's chin, a soft chokehold, locking it at the elbow, cutting off the air. It was silent. It was practiced. Sloan gurgled, clawing at Dorian's arm. And I, now secure behind Dorian, completed the move we had never rehearsed, but both understood. I drove my elbow backward, using the momentum of the spin with all my weight, jamming it directly into Sloan's kidney. He convulsed, a pained, choked sound. His body went limp, and Dorian let him drop. He was on the ground, gagging, his fight gone. It had taken less than 3 seconds. It was not a fight, it was a deletion. Rowena watched it all, her eyes wide, her smirk gone. You think this changes anything?" "Now," a new voice boomed, amplified by a loudspeaker. My father. He was in the crane operator's cab. High above us, he threw a massive industrial switch. The night vanished. The ancient storm lights, dozens of them, blasted on, flooding the Nightlark and the pier in brilliant, unforgiving white light. Rowena cried out, shielding her eyes. The light was the trigger. "The camera feed is live," Ivy's voice said in my ear, calm as ice, streaming. Rowena, blinded, had dropped her silver briefcase. It had snapped open on the deck. The harsh lights of the crane illuminated its contents perfectly. Stacks of fake, official-looking Federal Commerce Bureau seals, lists of delivery coordinates and offshore accounts, and the signed, original Harbor Gate contracts, authorizing their security operations. It was all there, A pristine, perfect package of treason. "And where is that feed going, Ivy?" Dorian asked, his voice quiet, his hand still holding mine. "High above the city, on the massive digital screen of the port bulletin, the one that showed weather and shipping news to all of Rust Harbor." The image flickered, and then it held. The live feed. My father had aimed the crane's spotlight like a sniper, and Casper's hidden camera was the bullet. The audience was not just us, it was the entire city. Rowena stared at her open briefcase, illuminated for the world to see. She stared up at the crane, at the lights. "No," she whispered, her arrogance finally shattered. Then she looked at me, her face contorted, not with fear, but with a final, poisonous rage. "You," she spat, "the cafeteria girl, this was all you." She was not running for the boat, she was running at me. She pulled something from the pocket of her white coat, not a gun. It was a black snub-nosed device, a high-voltage electric weapon, a taser. She raised it, aiming for my chest. I did not have time to react. I did not even have time to breathe. Dorian moved. He did not check on Sloane. He did not look at Rowena's men. He just acted. He shoved me, hard, spinning me to the ground, and put his own body in the path. There was a sharp crack hiss. 2 small darts, trailing thin wires, embedded themselves high in his shoulder. Dorian roared. It was not a sound of pain. It was a sound of fury. His entire body locked up, a massive electrical current seizing every muscle. He stumbled, his knees buckling, but he did not fall. He stood, shaking, taking the full, agonizing charge. In that frozen second, the pier exploded into motion. Ivy was a blur, coming from the shadows. She hit Rowena's arm, a sharp, surgical strike, a snap of bone. The taser clattered to the wood. Rowena spun, scrambling for the gangplank of the Night Lark. A figure blocked her path. Dr. Casper Niles. He was pale, his glasses fogged, but he stood there, his hands shaking, blocking her only escape. And then, the sirens. Not the casino. These were real, loud, and closing fast. The PIC, the feds, summoned by the data, were flooding the berth. It was over. No epic gunfight, no bodies falling into the harbor. Rowena's empire had not been conquered. It had been exposed, documented, and seized. Ivy was already at Dorian's side, cutting the taser wires from his jacket. Rowena was screaming, cuffed by PIC agents. I scrambled to my feet. Dorian was leaning against the container, his face pale. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. The pain had to be overwhelming. I went to him, my hands shaking. "Dorian, you are hurt. I stopped. I looked down. From the moment Sloane had lunged, from the instant I had gripped his hand as the signal, he had not let go. Not when he had spun me. Not when he had choked Sloane. Not even when he had taken 500,000 volts of electricity. His fingers were locked with mine, an ironclad, painful, absolute grip. She had held his arm to scare off a customer. The Mafia boss did not let go. It was not a story title. It was a fact. The sun rose on a new Rust Harbor. The city woke up to a story that was louder than any foghorn. The Harbor Ledger, the city's oldest newspaper, ran a headline in thick, black ink that screamed across every newsstand: "Wren's wings clipped black market. Pharmaceutical ring collapses in Rust Harbor." The public feed from the port bulletin had been undeniable. The city was in an uproar. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the syndicate. Harbor Gate Protective was dissolved by the end of the day, its assets seized, its leadership facing a battery of federal charges. At St. Aurelian, a new security protocol was implemented, funded by an anonymous donation from Vail Logistics, providing a dedicated, secure escort service for all night shift employees. The women I had worked with were finally safe. My mother was more than safe. She was healing. With the recovered shipments of PHX-13, her new medical team at Winter Hall adjusted her treatment. The color returned to her face for the first time in years. Garrick Sloane, the man who started it all, received a heavy sentence. The public assault charge from the gala, combined with his role as an enforcer for the syndicate, buried him. And Rowena Pike. She was facing a chain of indictments so long it would take a decade to try them all. The video of her ordering the death of the port inspector, the open briefcase, the fake seals, it was an open and shut case. She had been the invisible queen of the harbor, and she had been dethroned by a cafeteria cashier. Life shifted. Dorian offered me a world. He offered me Winterhall, a life of safety and luxury, a life where I would never have to check a price tag or fear the dark again. I could have been the mafia boss's muse, kept safe in a glass greenhouse. I said no. I could not. I would not be a protected item. I had spent my life fighting, and I did not know how to stop. But I did not want to fight against anything anymore. I wanted to fight for something. With the help of a very grateful doctor, Casper Niles, and a significant, completely anonymous investment from a logistics firm, I opened the Hearthline Night Kitchen. It was a small, warm, brightly lit diner, built from the bones of an old shipping office right near the port gates. We served subsidized, hot, real food to the night shift workers of the city, the dock hands, the nurses, the transport drivers, the people who, like me, lived their lives in the shadows. Dorian's world changed, too. He called a press conference, a move that stunned the old families of Rust Harbor. He announced that the Vale family was divesting from all business, leased or owned, that had any contact with the medical supply chain. He called it a liability. But it was a moral line. Instead, he announced a new venture, a completely transparent, cold logistics division, with a third-party auditing system that would be made available to the public. He was taking his father's criminal enterprise and dragging it, piece by piece, into the light. My father, Jonah Hart, did the same, as agreed. He walked into the PIC office and turned himself in. He became the government's star witness, and in return was granted full protection. I saw him one last time before he disappeared. We met in a sterile, gray room. It was not a Hollywood reunion. It was awkward and painful. There were 7 years of lies between us, a ghost of a life that we could never get back. But as he left, I promised I would find him. One day. I promised we would try to rebuild. It was not a happy ending, but it was a real one. A few weeks later, the kitchen was closed. It was after 3 a.m., and a soft rain was hissing against the windows. I was alone, wiping down the steel counter. The greenhouse at Winterhall had become my sanctuary, the one place I could breathe. I did not know he was there until I saw his reflection in the dark glass. Dorian was standing by the door. His arm was in a sling, the black silk a stark contrast to his white shirt. The taser had done its damage, severe muscle and nerve trauma, but he was here. He was standing. He did not say anything. He just walked over and took the wet rag from my hand, tossing it into the sink. "You should be resting," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I am," he said. He looked at my hands, red and raw from scrubbing dishes. He gently took them, turning them over, tracing the new calluses. "You did not have to build this," he said, gesturing to the kitchen outside the greenhouse. "I would have given you anything." "I know," I said, "but I did not want to be given. I wanted to build. I am not the girl you need to protect anymore. Dorian." "I know that, too." He stepped closer. The rain drummed on the glass roof, a steady, soft rhythm. He lifted his good hand, the one that was not in the sling. He did not touch my face. He slowly, deliberately, ran his fingers down my arm, from my shoulder to my wrist. It was a simple, claiming touch that set my skin on fire. I shivered, and I did not pull away. He leaned in, and I met him halfway. The kiss was not the desperate, frantic collision on the rooftop. It was slow. It was deep. It was a question and an answer all at once. His hand moved from my arm to my back, pulling me gently against him. I could feel the heat of his body, the solid, steady beat of his heart. My own hands found his waist, then moved up, my fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. It was a kiss of shared breath, of quiet exploration. It was a promise, But it was not a fairy tale. It was a hard-won, respectful, adult intimacy. He broke the kiss, but only to rest his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. We just stood there, breathing each other in, the smell of jasmine and rain and the faint, clean scent of cedar. "I am choosing to stay here, in this city," I whispered, my eyes still closed. "Not because I owe you, not because I am afraid, but because I trust you." I felt him inhale, a long, slow breath, and he murmured, his voice thick, "am choosing to learn how to love someone without trying to control them. It is new." The opening night of the Hearthline Night Kitchen was chaos. It was loud, it was hot, it was packed. Every nurse, orderly, and dockhand in a 5-mile radius was there, all talking at once, all laughing. I was behind the counter, slinging hash browns and pouring coffee. My face flushed, my heart so full I thought it might burst. I was overwhelmed, in the best possible way. I paused for a second, leaning against the counter, and my hand brushed my keys. I saw the steel keychain, hold. I smiled. I closed my hand around it, the metal cool and solid in my palm. A moment later, a large, warm hand covered mine. I looked up. Dorian was there, and he was not in a suit, and he was in a dark sweater, his sling gone, his presence a sudden, quiet island in the noisy room. He did not say a word. He just looked at me, at the chaos I had built, and his eyes were full of a deep, profound respect. He interlaced his fingers with mine. Our hands joined over the keychain. We had not promised each other forever. We had not promised each other an easy life. We both knew the storms would always come, that Rust Harbor was still Rust Harbor. We had only promised that when they did, we would hold on. The next morning, I was at the kitchen before dawn, waiting for the first delivery. The mist was thick, rolling in off the harbor, muffling the sounds of the cranes. I looked out at the familiar skeletal skyline. A small brown bird, a real one, landed on a heavy cargo cable near the window. It tilted its head, looked at me, and sang 2 sharp, clear notes. It was not a symbol, it was not a threat or an omen. It was just a wren. And for the first time in my life, the air in Rust Harbor felt like peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know where in the world you are listening from. Please let me know in the comments and share your thoughts on Lena and Dorian's journey. Do not forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video. And if you really loved it, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.